A new front opens. Harry and Meghan's assets were just frozen in the US. The reason isn't what you think. It's not the king, it's the IRS. And it all comes down to the one document they prayed would never see the light of day. Today, we expose the paperwork that could bring their entire operation crashing down. Just hours ago, information surfaced from sources connected to United States federal agencies that has sent absolute shockwaves through the Montecito compound. The word being whispered in their circle right now is not about press intrusion or security threats. It is far more chilling: asset seizure. The game has changed. This is not about cameras or carefully crafted trauma narratives. This is about paperwork. And paperwork, as the saying goes, is where everything unravels. What we are witnessing is the opening of a new front, a silent, methodical war, waged not with headlines, but with ledgers and tax filings. Americans understand one principle instinctively: you do not play games with the Internal Revenue Service. The IRS does not operate on celebrity time. It is an institution of cold precision, immune to public relations campaigns, and deaf to appeals of victimhood. According to high-level sources, a formal inquiry into the Archewell Foundation was initiated not as a routine check, but as a result of mounting unanswered questions from the public and watchdog groups. When the noise becomes too loud, official channels are forced to act. This is the institutional response to a position that has become untenable. The questions are simple, but their implications are profound. Where is the money going? What do these operational expenses actually represent? And why, in an organization built on the premise of public service, is there such a profound lack of transparency? This is the beginning of a systematic financial siege, and the walls are closing in. Let us be very clear about something. When the IRS initiates an investigation into a charitable organization, this is not a surface-level audit. The process goes deep. Forensic accountants track every dollar, examining every expense that appears even remotely personal. Payments that might be circling back to the foundation's founders are followed with meticulous care. Operational costs that could be conveniently funding a personal lifestyle instead of the stated charitable mission are scrutinized under a microscope. Staff salaries, travel expenses, security costs, consulting fees, all of it is laid bare. If anything appears to benefit the founders personally, red flags are raised that can trigger a full-scale criminal investigation. According to the whispers circulating among financial analysts in Washington, the claim is that money classified as charitable expenses may have been flowing directly back to Harry and Meghan themselves through a network of shell companies and unclear ownership structures. We are not talking about a small accounting error. We are talking about substantial amounts of money potentially being reclassified in what could be construed as a deliberate act of systematic financial deception. You cannot spin that away with good PR. You cannot fix that with a carefully worded statement. This is a serious problem, the type that doesn't just go away. It is the type that follows you across jurisdictions and across time. Let us be clinically precise about what an asset freeze entails for an entity like the Sussex enterprise. This is not a delay, not a hold for review. It is a complete commercial and social termination notice. When federal authorities lock down the accounts of a charitable foundation, it is the financial equivalent of a tactical strike. Every account, every asset, every dollar that flows through that foundation is rendered inert. No transfers, no withdrawals, no access. For an operation like the one run from Montecito, this is catastrophic. High-level palace insiders have long understood that Archewell was never merely a philanthropic side project. It was designed as the financial spine of their entire post-royal infrastructure. This foundation is the central nervous system through which all resources flow. Staff salaries, the six-figure retainers for PR firms specializing in strategic narrative placement, the exorbitant security costs, even the overhead for their lavish lifestyle, all of it is allegedly channeled through this single entity. When that entity is frozen, the entire operation grinds to a halt. It represents not just a liquidity crisis, but an existential one. You cannot pay your team. You cannot fund the protection you claim is essential. You cannot retain the lawyers required to navigate the crisis. The financial safety mechanism has been severed, and the American dream is rapidly transforming into a financial nightmare. The atmosphere inside the Sussex residence reportedly resembles a siege. The panic is palpable. And here is the telling part. They are not responding with documentation. They are not presenting clean paperwork or detailed filings that would clear this all up. When you have the receipts, when the numbers add up, you present them. You do not create distractions. You do not suddenly pivot to talking about security threats. But when the cash stops moving, when the accounts that keep your entire world running become untouchable, you cannot fight back with facts, because perhaps the facts are exactly what you don't want people to see. The panic isn't about being misunderstood, it's about being exposed. When the infrastructure that supports your whole operation gets shut down, you don't stay and work through the system. You look for an exit. You look for somewhere else to go where the same scrutiny might not follow. The freeze has changed the entire game. They are no longer in control. The situation is controlling them. And that is a terrifying predicament for individuals who have built their entire brand on the illusion of commanding their own destiny. The financial spine has been severed, and the paralysis is setting in. To understand the gravity of this situation, one must understand the contract that Archewell, as a 501c tax-exempt organization made with the American public, this status is not a gift, it is a contract. Under the United States tax code, a public charity is granted significant tax benefits in exchange for one non-negotiable condition: transparency. It is legally required to provide its tax returns, the Form 990, to any member of the public who formally requests them. This is not optional. It is a substantial breach of duty to refuse. For months, multiple journalists and financial analysts followed the proper channels. They submitted the correct forms and requested the 2023 and 2024 tax records for the Archewell Foundation. The response was silence. The documents never materialized. This is not a minor administrative hiccup. In the world of institutional management, this is a deliberate act of concealment. The failure to comply raises immediate red flags, suggesting that the information contained within those documents would create larger problems than the penalty for withholding them. The central question becomes inescapable. If these were legitimate financial arrangements, if the money was flowing to charitable causes as claimed, why the secrecy? This behavior aligns perfectly with a pattern of erasing the past when it conflicts with the current narrative. The Form 990 is the financial soul of a nonprofit. It details revenue, expenses, salaries of key employees, and payments to contractors. It is the document that proves an organization is adhering to its charitable mission and not simply acting as a slush fund for its founders. By withholding this document, the Sussex enterprise has effectively declared that its operations cannot withstand public scrutiny. Their silence speaks volumes. It is an admission that the numbers do not align with the carefully constructed public image of philanthropy and service. People do not ignore formal legal requests for public documents unless challenging them creates a larger problem. This refusal, this fundamental breach of their contract with the American public, is precisely the kind of behavior that forces an institution like the IRS to move from passive observation to active investigation. It is the trigger for the catastrophe that followed. They have not just broken trust, they have violated the core tenet of their legal status in the United States. The silence from Archewell was damning. But what happened next was the institutional confirmation of profound dysfunction. The IRS itself has not published the Foundation's recent returns on its public database. Let that sink in. This only occurs for one reason. The paperwork was not approved. When the Internal Revenue Service reviews a charity's tax documents, its agents are searching for consistency, transparency, and accuracy. They are ensuring that expenses are properly categorized and that the organization's activities align with its stated charitable mission. When a filing is not cleared for public release, it means a federal agent has examined those records and found something they did not like. It means the numbers did not add up. It means the expenses did not appear to match the mission. It means the documents failed to pass the most basic level of institutional scrutiny. This is the moment the conversation shifts from public relations to a potential federal investigation into fraudulent conduct. This is not a minor administrative hiccup. This is a red flag of the highest order. For an operation that runs its entire world through one financial hub, this is a structural crisis. When a charity cannot get its basic tax returns accepted by the very body that grants its tax-exempt status, then everything connected to it becomes questionable. Every expense, every transaction, every payment is now under a microscope. Donors start asking questions with a new urgency. Corporate partners begin to formally distance themselves. And the people who write the checks that keep the entire Sussex enterprise afloat begin to wonder if they have been party to a massive deception. The refusal of the IRS to grant even a basic stamp of approval is the institutional elimination of the foundation's credibility. Without cleared returns, without transparent records, the whole operation begins to look shaky, not just to the public, but to the federal government itself. The pressure intensifies, the questions get harder, and the walls close in even further. This is the official judgment, delivered not with a press release, but with the cold, damning silence of an empty space on a government database where their filings ought to be. As forensic accountants begin to examine the Arkawell ledgers, their scrutiny naturally extends to connected organizations, and the financial flows surrounding the Invictus Games have now raised deeply uncomfortable questions. Consider the case of Birmingham, which received a staggering £26 million to host the Games. This massive allocation was granted while the city of Birmingham itself was declaring bankruptcy, cutting essential public services, and facing a complete financial collapse. People have begun to ask a very logical question. Where precisely did that money go? More importantly, why are veterans, the very people the Invictus Games is supposed to benefit, still reporting chronic underfunding and a lack of adequate resources? When such a massive sum is allocated to an event in a city that is financially collapsing, while the supposed beneficiaries see little of the support, it suggests a pattern. It raises the possibility that the issues at Archewell are not an isolated incident, but a feature of a broader strategy of financial mismanagement. These are no longer separate issues happening coincidentally. These are connected organizations, connected people, and connected financial flows. When one foundation starts raising red flags, people naturally look at the other entities in the same orbit. They wonder if the same problems exist elsewhere. They start asking if this is an isolated issue or a pattern of conduct. And once that happens, once donors and governments and the public all start demanding to know where the money went, the whole dynamic changes. Because now it's not just about Harry and Meghan anymore. It's not just about Arkawell. It's about everyone connected to these financial pipelines, everyone who signed off on these transactions, everyone who benefited from these arrangements. The scrutiny expands outward, touching everyone in the network. The Invictus shadow now looms large over the entire Sussex operation, transforming a story about a single charity into a sprawling inquiry into a potential international network of financial deception. The numbers don't add up, and the world is starting to demand answers. The asset freeze and the Invictus questions have triggered a predictable yet devastating chain reaction. Institutions are beginning to protect themselves. When federal scrutiny reaches this level, organizations that were once supportive suddenly create distance. Corporate partners who were once cooperative begin to cover their own exposure. This is a masterful exercise of soft power, where the pressure builds not through public declarations, but through closed doors and severed ties. The problem is no longer confined to the jurisdiction of the IRS. International donors, foreign governments that provided funding for the games, and corporate sponsors are all demanding accountability. They are asking to see the ledgers. They are following the trail. When the financial heat intensifies to this degree, nobody wants to be caught holding the bag. We are witnessing the methodical dismantling of the Sussex position, not by the royal family, but by the global financial and corporate institutions they sought to leverage. The network they tried to build is now turning against them, as each entity moves to protect itself from the fallout of a looming financial scandal. The siege is real, and it is now transatlantic. This is the moment where the institutional survival instinct kicks in. Organizations that once saw an association with the Sussexes as a PR benefit now view it as a catastrophic liability. Phone calls go unreturned. Partnership agreements are quietly allowed to expire. Legal teams are instructed to review every contract for exit clauses. This is not personal, it is institutional management. When the trail is being followed and answers are being demanded at this level, no organization is willing to risk its own reputation and legal standing to protect individuals who cannot account for their own financial activities. The walls are not just closing in, they are being reinforced from the outside by the very institutions the Sussexes once counted as allies. This is the price of operating without transparency. The support network has evaporated, leaving them isolated and exposed. Just as the financial pressure reaches its peak, a familiar narrative is suddenly and aggressively revived. Security. Out of nowhere, Harry's safety concerns dominate the headlines. The push for state-funded protection in the UK is renewed. The timing is not a coincidence, it is a tactic. Let us be very clear. This has nothing to do with paparazzi or drones. This is the weaponization of a narrative to create a pretext for a strategic retreat. When the accounts are locked in America, when the funding is cut off, when federal scrutiny becomes unbearable, that is the precise moment the protection talk ramps up. This is a classic diversionary maneuver designed to reframe a flight from legal jurisdiction as a necessary act of protecting one's family. If you can convince the world you are leaving because of a physical threat, you are not seen as running away from financial heat. The optics completely change. But the timeline reveals the truth. The safety narrative is deployed as a shield, an almost perfect justification for a rapid relocation. It is an attempt to control the story, but the pattern is too obvious. This isn't about cameras. It's about finding an exit when the walls are closing in. The conversation isn't really about safety. It's about jurisdiction. It's about finding a place where different rules might apply, where the glare of American federal law is less intense. By framing a departure as a safety issue, you create a public justification that is almost impossible to argue against. Who is going to challenge someone claiming their family is in danger? It is the perfect shield, the perfect explanation for why you need to leave quickly, why staying where you are is no longer an option. But when you see how this safety narrative picks up speed at the exact moment the financial heat peaks, it becomes clear what is actually happening. This is not about threats. It is about finding an escape route from a legal and financial predicament of their own making, and security is just the excuse that makes that exit look justified. For years, palace strategists have spoken of the California risk, initially framed as Prince William's calculated concern that Princess Diana's legacy could be divided in a Los Angeles courtroom under community property statutes. But now, the true nature of the California risk has been realized, and it is far more dangerous. The risk was never a divorce court. It was the inescapable jurisdiction of the United States Treasury and the Internal Revenue Service. In America, royal titles offer no shield. Your family connections do not alter the tax code. The system does not care who you are related to. It cares only if the paperwork adds up. The American legal and financial system has become a hostile territory, not because of public sentiment, but because of its cold, impartial enforcement of the law. The country that was supposed to represent freedom and opportunity has become a legal trap. The urgent need to leave is not about safety from photographers. It is about escaping a jurisdiction where their status grants them no special privilege and where their financial activities are now under a microscope they cannot control or evade. The American dream has ended, and the reality of American law has begun. They operated under the catastrophically wrong assumption that their status would insulate them from the consequences that apply to ordinary citizens and organizations. That assumption has now shattered against the hard reality of federal statutes. The very system they hoped to leverage for their commercial ventures has now turned its full, impartial attention upon them. The laws designed to ensure transparency in charitable organizations do not make exceptions for former royals or Hollywood celebrities. This is the unthinkable outcome they never planned for. Having spent years attacking the British institution, they now find themselves cornered by the American one, an institution far less concerned with tradition and far more concerned with the letter of the law. The land of opportunity has become the land of accountability, and that has made it an intolerably hostile jurisdiction. The sudden pivot towards a potential return to the United Kingdom is not driven by sentiment or homesickness. It is a calculated, strategic repositioning. In America, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are outsiders operating in foreign territory. They do not possess the deep institutional knowledge required to navigate a crisis of this magnitude. Britain, however, is home turf. Prince Harry grew up inside the royal system. He understands its protocols, its key players, and its unwritten rules. This is not about reconciliation with his family. The timing makes that narrative absurd. This is about retreating to a defensible position. It is about moving the conflict to a landscape he understands instinctively, a place where he has a built-in network and a lifetime of familiarity. When your financial foundation has crumbled in one country, you look for advantages in another. The UK offers the singular advantage of insider knowledge. It is a move driven by strategy, not emotion. This is not running home. It is a tactical withdrawal to a place where he believes the rules of engagement might be different. Consider the implications. By returning to the UK, he can attempt to leverage his residual status and relationships in a way that is impossible in America. He can navigate the media landscape with a familiarity that he lacks in California. When you are under pressure, when you need to make moves quickly, being somewhere with that level of understanding is a massive advantage. This is not about nostalgia. This is about a game of attrition. When the financial situation collapses in one place, you look for somewhere that offers different advantages. This move, if it happens, is not emotional. It is a calculated play for survival, a retreat to the one place on earth where his name still carries a weight that cannot be entirely erased by an IRS investigation. It is the only real advantage he has left. This financial collapse is the inevitable conclusion to a pattern of systemic failure. The brand was built on a currency of image and public sympathy, but that currency has been devalued to the point of being worthless. Canada, the first attempted fresh start, ended in rejection. Brand deals that were supposed to guarantee their financial independence fell completely flat. According to sources close to their financial team, the Duke himself was forced to fund initiatives out of his own inheritance just to maintain the illusion of activity. Public sentiment has turned cold. Every institution they touch, from media giants like Spotify and Netflix to their own charitable foundations, ends up exhausted and frustrated. This is what happens when image races ahead of substance. You can sustain an operation on compelling narratives for a time, but eventually partners and the public demand to see results. They want to see value. They want to see something real behind the carefully constructed image. Without that substance, everything collapses. You cannot sustain an operation on storytelling alone. Staff cannot be paid with narratives. Funding cannot be secured with carefully worded statements about compassion. Doors will not stay open simply because you show up expecting your title to do the work. The math always catches up. This is the moment where everything crashes together. The money problems, the geographic rejection, the public distrust, and the institutional exhaustion. There is no safety net. There is no backup plan that suddenly makes things okay. There is only the harsh reality of a situation spiraling downward faster than anyone can manage. Image was their currency, and that currency has now lost all of its value. There is nothing left to trade on. Every move now feels desperate rather than strategic. Every statement feels reactive rather than planned. The runway has ended, the resources have dried up, and the doors have closed. Here is the brutal but necessary lesson that is now being taught. You cannot spin a spreadsheet. You cannot reframe a tax filing with a sympathetic interview. Numbers do not bend to narratives. Financial records are not swayed by claims of trauma or victimhood. They focus on one thing. Do the numbers add up, or do they not? For years, the Sussex enterprise operated on the principle that they could control the narrative. Through carefully worded statements, documentaries, and interviews, they crafted a story that generated sympathy and opened doors. But that strategy has now crashed into the unforgiving reality of financial documentation. A spreadsheet cannot be gaslit. An auditor cannot be emotionally manipulated. The documentation either verifies your claims or it exposes them. If it exposes them, no amount of public relations can fix that. The confidence that rules were flexible, that consequences could be avoided, is now meeting a reality where the rules are absolute. The numbers have to add up, and right now, they do not. Numbers don't care about your story. They don't care about struggles or how hard things have been. They just exist. And when the revenue isn't coming in, when expenses far exceed income, when loans get denied and deals fall through, the math wins every single time. This is the ultimate confrontation between their carefully constructed image and the cold, hard reality of their financial situation. The stories can be spun in interviews, messages can be controlled in statements, but tax filings cannot be reframed. The documentation either checks out or it doesn't, and all signs point to the fact that it does not. The judgment of numbers is final, and that judgment is now being rendered. The narrative has finally met a reality it cannot bend to its will. Power does not vanish in a single dramatic moment. It erodes. It is worn away through forms that are never submitted, through accounts that suddenly become inaccessible, through the growing chasm between public statements and private reality. What we are witnessing is not just another celebrity scandal. This is a countdown. The frozen accounts, the missing filings, the desperate pivot to security, these are the cracks through which the final vestiges of their power are disappearing. The absence of answers is now becoming the story itself. While the money was moving, the illusion of success could be maintained. But once access is cut off, once the accounts are locked, the silence becomes deafening. And that silence reveals more than any statement ever could. The pressure is building, and it will continue to build until something has to give. This is not a story that will fade away with the next news cycle. It is a story that is only just beginning because financial documentation demands a resolution. All of these elements, the frozen assets, the Invictus questions, the sudden security concerns, they do not exist in isolation. They are all pieces of the same puzzle. And when you step back and look at the whole picture, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. A trail of institutional exhaustion follows them everywhere they go. The absence of answers, of basic financial transparency, becomes the story itself. Locked accounts, disappearing access, unanswered questions, these things create their own powerful narrative. And that narrative is getting louder every single day. This chapter is far from over, because financial inquiries of this magnitude do not just blow over. They don't fade away with time or good PR. They demand resolution. They force decisions. They create a pressure that builds and builds until something fundamental has to break. And right now, we are watching those decisions play out in real time. The conflict has reached its inevitable conclusion. The judgment that began in the Oak Room at Windsor Castle now passes from the institution of the monarchy to the far less forgiving institutions of law and finance. The facts, as alleged by sources deep within the federal system, are stark. A charitable foundation, the financial spine of the entire Sussex enterprise, is under federal scrutiny for potential misuse of funds. Tax filings, documents required by law to be public, have been withheld. Millions of pounds in donations connected to the Invictus Games are now subject to uncomfortable questions that have no easy answers. And the response from the California branch has not been transparency, but a desperate scramble to change the narrative and potentially the jurisdiction. This chapter is not over because the ledger is still open. The documentation is out there waiting, and the numbers still need to add up. For years, we have been told a story of escape, of freedom, of two people seeking a quieter life away from the cold precision of institutional duty. But the documentation tells a different story. It speaks not of freedom, but of a fundamental breach of duty to the American public. It speaks not of privacy, but of a profound and deliberate secrecy surrounding their financial infrastructure. This is the final brutal lesson. You cannot build a global brand on a foundation of public sympathy while conducting your business in the shadows. The cash has stopped flowing. The questions haven't been answered. The pressure keeps building. The ledger is still out there, waiting to deliver its final verdict. Now, the judgment passes to the jury of public opinion. Are we witnessing a calculated retreat from an unjust system, or the desperate final moves of an enterprise facing a long overdue financial reckoning? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear what you're seeing in all of this. Type Team Sussex if you believe this is all a misunderstanding. Type Team Reality if you believe that in the end, the paperwork never lies. The verdict is coming